There is a moment in every person's life that doesn't announce itself. No fireworks, no dramatic exit, no slammed door. It happens quietly, usually at the end of a long day, when you're staring at a ceiling instead of sleeping, and a single thought passes through you like cold water. I don't need them to understand me anymore. That's it. That's the whole moment. And yet, somehow, it changes everything. If you've ever spent years trying to make someone see your side of the story, a parent, an ex, a friend who slowly became a stranger, you already know the exhaustion I'm talking about. You know what it feels like to rehearse your explanations in the shower, to replay arguments you already lost, searching for the sentence that would have finally made them get it. Here's the thing nobody tells you. Some people were never going to get it, not because you explained it wrong, because understanding you was never their goal. Stay with me, because I'm going to walk you through exactly how a person moves from that exhausted, over-explaining version of themselves to someone who simply cannot be reached anymore. Not out of coldness, out of something much stronger. By the end of this, you'll recognize which stage you're in right now. And more importantly, you'll know exactly what the next one looks like. Part 1. The cost of being understood. Let's start with an uncomfortable question. Why do we fight so hard to be understood by people who have shown us repeatedly that they're not interested in understanding us? Think about that for a second. Not rhetorically. Actually think about it. Most of us were taught, somewhere in childhood, that love is earned through being known. That if you just explain yourself clearly enough, cry hard enough, prove yourself thoroughly enough, the people who hurt you will finally see the truth and change. So we become explainers, translators of our own pain. We hand people a dictionary to our hearts and wait for them to read it. And some of them never even open the book. There's a particular kind of tiredness that comes from this. It's not the tiredness of working too hard. It's the tiredness of being unseen while trying so hard to be seen. It sits behind your eyes. It shows up as irritability over small things, because the big thing is too heavy to touch. It shows up as needing to lie down for 20 minutes after a 5-minute phone call with someone who just wanted to talk. If you're feeling that right now, I want you to know something clearly. That tiredness is not a character flaw. It is not proof that you're too sensitive, too much, too dramatic. It is the natural result of spending your energy on a transaction where only one person is paying in. Here's a story, not about one specific person, but a pattern I've seen play out in dozens of lives, pieced together into a single figure I'll call the arguer. Because you'll recognize her whether she reminds you of your mother, your ex, your boss, or yourself. The arguer has a gift. She can make you feel, in the middle of an argument, that you are somehow the unreasonable one, even when you walked in holding all the receipts. She doesn't argue to solve anything. She argues to survive the argument. Winning is not the point. Depleting you is the point, because a depleted person stops asking hard questions. For years, the people around her kept trying new tactics, softer words, sharper facts, written letters, therapy sessions. Every tactic assumed the same thing, that somewhere inside her was a door, and if you just found the right key, she'd open it and finally say, "You're right. I'm sorry I see you now." That door never opened, not because the key was wrong, because there was no door. And this is the hardest thing to accept about certain relationships. Not that the person disagrees with you, but that they are not, in this lifetime, going to have the moment of clarity you've been waiting for. Waiting for it isn't patience. It's a slow, invisible form of self-abandonment. So the first shift, the one that has to happen before anything else changes, is this. You have to stop treating their understanding as a requirement for your peace. Not because they don't deserve to understand you. They might. But your peace cannot be a hostage held for ransom by someone else's willingness to grow. Let that sink in before we go further, because everything else in this video builds on that one idea. Part 2. The addiction to being right. There's a strange irony that most people never notice. The more someone hurts you, the more you want them to admit it, not just stop. Admit it. Say the words. Confirm out loud that what happened, happened, and that it was their fault, and that you were justified in every ounce of pain you felt. This craving feels like justice. It feels noble even. But if you look closer, it's actually a trap, one that keeps you tethered to the very person you're trying to free yourself from. Here's why. When your peace depends on someone else's confession, you have handed them the final say over your emotional state. You've essentially told your own nervous system, I cannot fully relax until they validate my experience. Which means, functionally, they still control you. Maybe not through affection anymore, through your need for their acknowledgement. This is where a lot of people get stuck for years. Not because they miss the person, because they miss the ending they think they deserve. The apology, the tears, the moment where the other person finally realizes what they lost. I want to gently tell you something that might sting a little. That ending is a movie scene. Real life rarely gives it to you. And if you keep waiting for the movie scene, you will miss every real, quiet, undramatic exit that's actually available to you right now. Let me describe what waiting for that ending actually costs, because it's more expensive than people realize. It costs you presence. You're not fully in your current life. You're half living in a courtroom in your mind, presenting evidence to a judge who already left the building. It costs you new relationships, because a person who is still building a case against their past can accidentally put a new partner, a new friend, a new boss on trial for crimes they didn't commit. And it costs you time. Every year spent waiting for someone else's remorse is a year you didn't spend building the life that makes their remorse irrelevant. So here's the second shift. You have to consciously, deliberately let go of the ending you think you're owed, not because they don't owe it to you. Many of them absolutely do. But because collecting on that debt is not actually in your control, and building a life around collecting a debt someone refuses to pay is not strength. It's a very well-disguised form of staying stuck. The moment you release the need for their confession is the same moment your healing stops depending on their character. That's not defeat. That is the exact definition of freedom. Part 3. Why calm people are misunderstood. Something interesting happens when a person finally reaches genuine calm after a long period of chaos. Everyone around them gets confused. Friends worry that you've shut down. Family says you've changed, usually said with suspicion, as if change is inherently a betrayal of the relationship as it used to be. The person who hurt you might even accuse you of being cold, of not caring anymore, of having no heart. This is one of the strangest parts of healing that almost nobody prepares you for. The healthier you become, the more unfamiliar you seem to the people who only ever knew the wounded version of you. Think about what that means for a second. The people closest to your pain often built an entire relationship with your pain. They know how to comfort your crying. They know how to respond to your anger. They know their role in the drama. But when the drama stops, when you stop crying, stop arguing, stop performing distress, some of them don't know what to do with you anymore. And instead of asking themselves why that is, they decide something must be wrong with you. This is important, so let me say it plainly. Calm is not the absence of feeling. It's the presence of mastery over feeling. But to someone who has only ever related to you through chaos, calm looks like distance. Sometimes it even looks like cruelty, simply because it removes the reaction they were used to extracting from you. I think about this like a fire that finally burns itself out in a forest. To someone standing far away, the absence of flame might look like the forest died. But if you walk closer, you'll see the ground is already doing what it always does after fire, clearing space quietly for something new to grow. Stillness after devastation is not the end of life. It's usually the beginning of a different kind of life. So if people around you seem unsettled by your new calm, understand what's actually happening. They're not upset because you've become worse. They're upset because you've become unpredictable to them. And unpredictability threatens people who built their comfort on knowing exactly how to move you. Let them be unsettled. Their discomfort is not evidence that you're doing something wrong. It's often evidence that you finally are. I want to walk you through what this transformation actually looks like in practice, not as abstract philosophy, but as specific, observable shifts in behavior. I'll call these the 7 quiet shifts, because none of them are loud, and that's exactly the point. Shift 1. You stop narrating your pain to people who caused it. Early on, most of us make the mistake of explaining our hurt directly to the person who hurt us, hoping the explanation itself will produce change. Eventually, you learn that explaining your wound to the person holding the knife rarely results in them putting it down. So, you stop narrating. Not because you no longer feel the pain, but because you finally understand who that particular story is and isn't for. Shift 2. You separate the apology from the healing. For a long time, healing and apology feel like the same event, like you can't have one without the other. But eventually, you realize you can heal without ever receiving the apology you wanted. It's slower, it's less satisfying in the short term, but it works, and it doesn't require the cooperation of someone who has already proven they're not going to cooperate. Shift 3. You stop rehearsing arguments you've already survived. If you've ever caught yourself arguing with someone in your head, someone who isn't even in the room, maybe someone you haven't spoken to in months, you know this one intimately. The shift happens when you notice the rehearsal starting and simply choose not to finish it. You interrupt the loop mid-sentence. At first, this feels unnatural, almost rude to your own mind. Eventually, it becomes automatic. Shift 4. You let their version of events exist without correcting it. This one is harder than it sounds. Somewhere along the way, most people develop an intense need to correct the record, to make sure everyone knows the real story. The quiet shift is realizing that the real story doesn't need your defense to remain true. Truth doesn't require an audience. It simply exists, whether or not it's ever publicly confirmed. Shift 5. You stop measuring your progress by their reaction to it. For a while, healing can feel hollow if the person who hurt you doesn't notice how far you've come. You want them to see the new version of you and feel something. Regret, jealousy, admiration, anything. The shift happens when their reaction, or complete lack of one, stops mattering to your sense of progress. You start measuring growth by how you feel waking up, not by whether they're watching. Shift 6. You become selective with your softness, not absent of it. This is often misread as coldness, but it's the opposite. You don't stop being kind. You stop being kind on demand to anyone who asks for it, regardless of how they've treated you. Your gentleness becomes something you choose to give, not something people can simply take because they know how to ask for it convincingly. Shift 7. You stop needing a final scene. The last shift, and often the hardest, is releasing the need for closure to look like anything specific. No goodbye conversation. No apology at a wedding or a funeral or a chance meeting at a grocery store. Sometimes the relationship simply fades, unfinished, unresolved, unceremonious, and you learn to let that be enough. Not because it's fair, because waiting for a better ending was costing you the present. Notice something about all 7 of these. None of them require the other person to do anything. None of them depend on an apology, a confrontation, a change of heart, or even a conversation. Every single shift happens entirely inside you, which means every single one of them is fully within your control, starting today, regardless of what the other person ever does. That's not a small detail. That might be the entire point. Part 5. The difference between detachment and numbness. I need to pause here and address something important, because this next distinction gets misunderstood constantly, and getting it wrong can quietly hurt you. Detachment is not the same thing as numbness. They can look identical from the outside. Both involve not reacting, but they come from completely different places, and they lead to completely different lives. Numbness happens when you shut a door on your feelings because they've become too dangerous to feel. It's a survival response. It protects you in the short term by making everything feel distant and muted, but it comes at a cost. You also go numb to joy, to connection, to the small good moments that make life worth living. Numbness doesn't discriminate. It closes the whole system down, not just the painful part. Detachment, the kind we're talking about in this video, is different. It's not the absence of feeling, it's the presence of choice. A detached person still feels the sting of an insult, still notices the ache of an old memory, still has a heartbeat that quickens when something painful surfaces. The difference is, they no longer feel obligated to act on every feeling that arises. They can feel something fully and still choose not to hand their behavior over to it. Here's a simple way to know which one you're experiencing. Ask yourself, if something wonderful happened right now, would I be able to feel it? If the answer is yes, if joy still reaches you, if laughter still comes easily in the right moment, if love still moves you, then what you're building is detachment, and it's healthy. If the answer is no, if everything feels flat, distant, and gray, including the good things, that's not detachment. That's a nervous system in survival mode, and it deserves care, not congratulations. This distinction matters because a lot of people chase the appearance of calm without doing the actual internal work and end up numb instead of free. They think they've healed because they no longer cry. But healing was never about the absence of tears. It was always about the presence of choice. If you notice yourself feeling numb rather than free, that's not a failure. That's simply information, a sign that there's still work to do, ideally with support before real detachment can take root. Be patient with yourself here. This part cannot be rushed without consequences. Part 6. Why this threatens the people who hurt you. Now let's talk about something almost nobody says directly, because it sounds harsh, but it's true, and it matters. People who thrive on your emotional reactions do not want you to reach this place, and when you get close to it, some of them will try, consciously or not, to pull you back. This isn't always dramatic. It's rarely a scene out of a movie. Usually, it's small, an unexpected text after months of silence, right when you finally stop checking your phone for their name. A sudden bout of vulnerability from someone who's never shown you vulnerability before, appearing right when you'd stopped needing it from them. A rumor, a comment to a mutual friend, a strange flicker of contact, designed less to reconnect and more to test whether the wire is still live. Why does this happen? Because on some level, most people, even difficult ones, can sense when they've lost their grip on someone, and losing that grip is uncomfortable for them, even if they never consciously admit it. Your reaction was, for a long time, a kind of proof to them that they still mattered to you, that they still had access, that they still held some form of power in your life. When that reaction disappears, so does their sense of relevance. This is why the final stretch of this journey is often the hardest. It's not the beginning, when the pain is sharp and obvious and everyone around you understands why you're struggling. It's the middle to end, when you're almost free and something small pulls you right back to the edge and you have to decide all over again whether you're going to fall back into old patterns or hold the new ground you've fought so hard to reach. If this happens to you, and statistically for most people it will, please don't interpret it as proof that you failed or that you're back at square one. A small pull toward an old pattern doesn't erase months of growth. It's simply a test, and tests exist to be passed, not to be feared. The people who successfully reach lasting detachment are rarely the ones who never feel the pull. They're the ones who feel it, notice it, and choose differently anyway. That single skill, noticing an old impulse and declining to obey it, is worth more than any amount of willpower spent trying to never feel the pull at all. Eventually, you stop building your life as a response to someone else's absence, as proof, as revenge, as a performance meant to be witnessed by people who hurt you. You start building it simply because it's yours, and it deserves to be good regardless of who's watching. This is a subtle but massive shift. Early in the process, a lot of personal growth is secretly motivated by an audience. You go to the gym, partly hoping they'll see the difference. You get the new job, partly hoping word will get back to them. You post the vacation photo, partly hoping it lands somewhere. It will be seen and felt. None of this makes you a bad person. It's an extremely human instinct, but it does mean your growth is still, in some quiet way, tethered to them. The final maturity in this journey is when that tether disappears entirely. You go to the gym because your body deserves care. You take the job because it's right for your life, not because of who might hear about it. You take the trip because you wanted to see that part of the world. Full stop, with no mental subtitle running underneath about who might be watching. When that shift happens, something remarkable occurs. The people who hurt you become, quite literally, irrelevant to your daily experience. Not hated, not even necessarily forgiven, in the traditional sense. Just irrelevant. Background noise in a life that has moved on to focus on things that actually deserve your attention. And here's the strange final twist in all of this. The thing that almost nobody expects going into this process. The moment you stop needing them to notice your growth is very often the exact moment they finally do notice it. Not because you did anything to attract that attention, simply because unbothered, self-contained people are rare, and rarity draws the eye whether it's seeking attention or not. But by then, it won't matter to you either way. And that's the whole point. That's the finish line that was never actually about them at all. It was always about you, quietly, patiently, becoming someone who doesn't need anyone else's permission to feel whole. The quiet after. I want to leave you with one final image. Picture someone standing at the edge of a lake early in the morning, before anyone else is awake. The water is completely still. No wind, no boats, no disturbance. And in that stillness, the lake reflects the sky perfectly. Every cloud, every shade of color, without distortion. That lake isn't still because nothing ever happened to it. Storms have crossed it, rocks have been thrown into it. It has been disturbed more times than it could count. It's still now because it has learned over and over how to return to stillness after disruption. That's not the same as never being disturbed. It's something far more impressive. The ability to come back to peace, reliably, no matter what's been thrown in. That's what this whole video has really been about. Not becoming a person nothing can touch. That version of strength doesn't exist, and chasing it will only exhaust you further. The real strength is becoming someone who can be disturbed and still find their way back to stillness, a little faster and a little more completely each time. If any part of this reached something in you today, I'd love to know which shift you recognized most in yourself. Maybe in the comments, maybe just quietly to yourself. In the next few minutes of silence, after this video ends, sit with it for a second before you move on to whatever's next in your day. And if you found this valuable, consider staying a little longer in this space. Not because the video needs your subscription to matter, but because the work of becoming someone who no longer needs to explain themselves is not a one-time realization. It's a practice. And practices are easier to keep when you're not doing them alone. Take care of your peace today. It's the only thing in this entire story that was always fully yours.